Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends. Welcome to part 5 of our 5-part Modern Masters 2017 full set review. Today we're going to look at all of the green cards and the rest of the cards in the set. So we're going to wrap things up today. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find some links to our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases through any of those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. It really goes a long way to help us keep doing what we're doing. Secondly, there's also links to Patreon, another way to support us, and we're actually really close to our next goal, so check that out if you get a chance. And thank you to all the folks who have done both, made purchases through those links on Amazon and have supported us on Patreon. All right, let's talk about the cards. And first thing I want to mention, now in the previous video, we went into all the different archetypes. I don't want to repeat all of that. However, since we are talking about green cards today, I do want to at least refresh you on what type of archetypes we're going to be looking at when it comes to these cards. So you're going to hear me mention these following decks a number of times. We're going to be thinking about red-green token go wide. We're going to be thinking about green-white populate. We're going to be thinking about Jund sacrifice, Naya token aggro, and finally Bant splicers. That's mainly where the green cards are going to fall. All right, let's get on with it because we got a lot of cards to talk about, and let's get started with Arachnus Spinner. All right, this is actually just a big old spider. I mean, 5/7 with reach, great defensive card. Really good offensive card too, quite honestly. It's a little higher on the curve. You don't want to put too many of these things in your deck, considering you don't want to draw like 2 of these in your opening hand. So I think a 1 of is fine. It also has the bonus ability that you can tap it or another spider you control to search up an Arcanus Web, which we're going to look at next, which is sort of a quasi-pacifism effect, which can be decent in certain situations as well. So yeah, fantastic card. And as a matter of fact, there is at least one other spider we'll look at later today that also plays well with this because you can tap it to search for the spider web. Arcanus Web. Well, here you go. It only costs 3. This one's a common, so they should be fairly easy to pick up. It is a lot like pacifism. What's nice, though, is activated abilities can't be activated, so that can be very, very helpful in certain situations. The downside being, if a creature's power is 4 or greater at the beginning of the end step, you have to destroy it. So if you play it on a large creature, it has a very limited effect, like maybe just for 1 turn. And if you play it on a smaller creature and your opponent buffs it or something, like uses a pump spell, then it could potentially go away that way too. So they're a little fragile, but a lot of times in green, you don't have a lot of options when it comes to removal. So this is a fair one. Avacyn's Pilgrim. Okay, obviously it's a green card that's going to tap for white, so you're probably already thinking, well, populate decks, Bant decks, stuff like that. However, this is just good mana ramp no matter what. If you're in green and you're casting this early, even if you're not playing white, getting the extra mana as generic mana is very, very relevant. 1-drop mana dorks are awesome. Now, granted, they're common. You should be able to pick up 1 or 2, hopefully, if you're in the market to do so. But there's going to be a lot of competition. These are very high picks in a draft. They really just help you cheat out things maybe a turn earlier, 2 turns earlier if you're really lucky, and you can really start to pull ahead of your opponent. Very, very powerful card. Don't overlook it. Baloth Cage Trap. I like this card. Here's the deal. It's a 4/4 token for 5, so first off, for 5 mana, like, I'm okay with that, even if you ignore the whole trap piece of it. And the fact that if I'm going to play this most likely in, like, the Selesnya Populate deck or the Bant Splicer deck, if that's the case, then I might find extra value by being able to populate the token in the future. I'm down for 5 mana just off that alone. Now, the fact of the matter is, if someone plays an artifact that can potentially play this for 2 is even better. You don't have a lot of artifacts in the set, but you have all the signets, and this is a very color-intensive set. Signets are really good cards. People are going to be playing them frequently. So there's a good chance you might be able to sneak this out on turn 2 or turn 3, or maybe both if you have a couple copies, because signets are going to be that prevalent. I actually have no doubt. So keep an eye on this card as maybe a higher pick than you would normally think of it as, just because of the amount of signets that are out there. Call of the Herd. Here's another really solid token generation creature. It's real cheap, 3 to get a 3/3, and you can even flash it back for another one on the next turn for 4 mana. That's phenomenal. You enhance this with some populate mechanics in the Selesnya deck or in Bant Splicers. But I'd go as far as to say this is still a good card in the Naya token decks or the Gruul Go Wide token decks, just because it's still very sizable. Next we have Crater Hoof Behemoth. So speaking of sizable, this certainly qualifies. Bottom line is this is basically a win condition. I mean, green is all about going wide with a lot of small creatures just in many of the archetypes, right, in this limited environment. So you know you're going to have a lot of great targets for this card. The tricky part is casting it at 8 mana. I'm not worried about the 3 on color. I think there's a lot of ways to really smooth out the color here. But getting the 8 mana, I mean, a little bit of ramp will help you at times. It will be annoying if you draw this in your opening hand, sure, but I think it's worth the risk. It's just that powerful. It can win you a game out of nowhere. The other thing I'm thinking about this, maybe Grixis Graveyard is a reanimation target. This would be a phenomenal reanimation target. So just another way you could go with it, but overall, fantastic mythic and holds some nice value too. Death Hood Cobra. There's not a huge amount of amazing 2-drops in the set, but the ones that are here are really good, and a lot of them are common, and this is a perfect example of that. This is just a great 2-drop no matter what archetype you're in, quite honestly. A 2/2 for 2 that you can pay to give it reach, or pay to give it Death Touch. That's actually kind of awesome. A lot of times this will just work as a removal spell for you. Druid's Deliverance. I'm usually not a huge fan of fog style effects unless I have multiple ones. Like I want to go like all in like turbo fog when I do that. However, this one is a little bit unique. First off, it only fogs damage coming to you. So this is one of those situations where you just take the damage and fog it. But it also populates. So sometimes you might just be simply looking for another populate trigger. And because it's also an instant that populates, it doubles as a combat trick on top of it. So I'm a little more open to running a one of in the deck without like necessarily trying to build like a whole turbo fog engine with this thing, and I think it can be actually pretty good for you. Explore. I like Explore, but I always get burned by it. Like, this is the card that is amazing on turn 2. It's still good on turn 3. It becomes not so good on turn 4. It becomes bad by turn 5, right? Like, it's just one of those things that just gets sort of annoying when you draw it at the wrong time. Now, it does replace itself, so don't get me wrong. It's not unplayable. It's a high-risk, high-reward card. If you really want to ramp into some good mid-range or even some good late-game stuff, and you want to try to speed things along, it might be worth running. But I'll be honest with you, a lot of times it doesn't make my cut just because of its inconsistencies. Fists of Ironwood. This is actually a pretty good aura. Usually I'm hard on auras, but the fact that this one gives you 2/1/1 green Saprolings, at least it gives you something. So if you get 2 for 1s, you didn't really get 2 for 1s completely. And also on top of it, if your creature survives, it has trample now. So that's actually kind of awesome. All that for 2 mana. I mean, think of it this way. Dragon Fodder gives you 2 goblins for 2 mana that are 1/1s and nothing else. So this has got one up on that one. And again, this kind of works out in a number of different archetypes for you. Because first off, one of the issues with the Naya token or the Gruul token decks is they have some nice sizable creatures, but they don't always have evasion. So this does give you trample, lets you get that damage across. If you're in a deck like maybe John's Sacrifice, for example, it gives you stuff that you can sacrifice with the Saprolings. If you're in Populate or Bant Splicers, it gives you tokens that you can populate later. So it kind of covers all the bases. Gaia's Anthem. Speaking of a card that kind of covers all the bases, with the exception of maybe John's Sacrifice, this is great in all of the decks. Again, going wide is a big theme with green, so getting a lot of creatures, being able to give them +1/+1 is huge. Again, I'm usually not a huge fan of enchantments that don't do anything alone, but when you're considering this is a solid green enchantment in a set that is giving you a lot of creatures to play with, this will never do nothing for you. So don't worry about playing 1 of, maybe even 2 of. It's an uncommon this time around. You could pick up an additional copy. Phenomenal card. Harmonize. Now this is another fantastic uncommon. This thing is a beating. First off, it's basically a blue card. It was originally Concentrate, and then this is the planar chaos version of Concentrate. So a lot of times green, even though they do give you card draw, a lot of times it's contingent upon like other things on the battlefield, like your creature's power and toughness and all that sort of stuff. This is just a flat out draw 3 cards for 4. Now, a lot of times green decks are aggressive and they don't want to take the turn off to do this necessarily, but I'll tell you from experience, it's worth taking the turn off because unlike red, which is another traditionally aggressive color, red and even black to some degree have better card draw than green does typically. So throwing a Harmonize in a green deck, even if it's more aggressively sound and more creature based, just helps you restock your hand. You'll be happy you played this. Definitely, I wouldn't mind running 1 of, maybe even 2 of. Hungry Spriggan. This is a nice beater, and it has trample. That's what I like most about it. I really am valuing these trample cards for the Naya decks and the Gruul decks very highly. This one is a little fragile being a 1/1, but it attacks in as a 4/4 trampler, and you can always buff that with some of the Blood Rush mechanics or combat tricks. This is actually quite good for 3, I think. Might of Old Krosa, and this is an awesome combat trick. Speaking of great combat tricks, I mean, +2/+2 for 1 mana, or if you play it on your main phase, +4/+4, throw this on a trample creature, you're doing some serious damage. Again, this is perfect, especially for those Naya token aggro decks or those Gruul token go wide decks. Penumbra Spider. This is the other spider I was alluding to earlier, and yes, it does play well with the spinner and letting you search up the webs and all that sort of thing. But what's really cool about this, basically a giant spider that when it dies, you get a 2/4 replacement in the form of a token. So this is great in a couple other probably more unorthodox decks like Jund Sacrifice, for example. You can sacrifice this and find additional value out of it. Also good in the Populate or the Splicer decks because you get another token under certain circumstances that you can potentially populate, which is a decent sized creature. Primal Command. Now, a lot of folks, when they saw this card, said, well, where's my Cryptic Command? I said the same thing, but we didn't get that. This time we got this one. It is a good limited card. Basically, it's a tutor. Tutors are good. And most of the time, this is going to be tutor for a creature and gain 7 life. And that's just fine. And usually I'm kind of like, 7 life, that's neither here nor there. However, you're kind of taking a turn off maybe to tutor, and it's nice to have that life cushion to deal with any crackback you get from not playing a creature that turn or something like that. And now going forward, you're set up in a real good place to play that big creature that you were able to search up. The other pieces are also relevant. I mean, imagine shuffling a graveyard into the library for someone that's playing like a Grixis Graveyard deck, or maybe someone was trying to mill you and you get to do it to yourself, or just even putting target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. At times that's going to be very relevant. So the versatility, flexibility of this card makes it amazing. Revive, another just strong green card for any archetype. You could argue maybe it's a little better in Jund Sacrifice because it just helps you keep the engine going by taking another card out of the graveyard, putting it back in your hand. But at the same time, this is just going to be good no matter what. This is green card, by the way, not creature, but a green card from your graveyard to your hand. Scavenging Ooze. Speaking of graveyard hate, this is a good one, but it doesn't have to be sideboard graveyard hate. This is still a solid 2-drop creature. Now it's rare, you won't see it a lot, but a 2/2 for 2 and the ability to kind of pick and choose what you want to remove out of graveyards and give this thing counters and gain life. That's a lot of ands for a 2-drop, and that's usually your measuring stick about how good a 2-drop is how many times you say and when you're describing it. Seal of Primordium. This is a fine sideboard card. You're going to run into some problematic enchantments from time to time, and once in a while you're going to run into a opponent who is really leaning super hard on signets. Put this in and punish them. Slaughterhorn. Here's another one of the Blood Rush mechanics. We saw a lot of these yesterday. +3/+2 for 3 is very serviceable for just 1 mana. Great combat trick, especially with Trample. And granted, it can only be used on attacking creatures. Do remember that, because that confuses some folks sometimes with Blood Rush. Secondly, it's a 3/2 if you're just trying to build out your board. This is going to be best in the Naya token, I think, or Gruul decks, but it's still good. Slime Molding. This is one I might skip unless I'm in the Selesnya Populate or the Bant Splicer deck. On its own, like a big mana dump to make one big dumb creature is okay, but if you have the ability to potentially duplicate that creature later, it becomes much, much better. Strength in Numbers. This is a potential common win condition, quite honestly. This is a powerhouse, because first off, it gives something trample. That's a huge deal on its own. And then the +X/+X based on how many attacking creatures you have, well, that's a nice bonus too, right? Like, this can help you put away a game, especially considering, again, green is about a lot of little creatures and going wide, so this can be a very powerful common to pick up. Summoning Trap. I like Summoning Trap. It does have the potential to fizzle a little bit, because first off, if you pay 6 for it, and you look at the top 7 cards, in Limited, you shouldn't miss. You should hit something. But the question is, are you hitting something worth 6 mana? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But at the same time, you are paying some mana just for the ability of choice and the ability to speed up your deck, and that's what this is doing, and I'm okay with that. Also, if someone happens to counter a spell and I play it for free, well, gravy on top. That's even better. So I don't mind running this. It's a rare. You won't see it very often, but a one of, I think, is just totally fine. Sylvan Ranger. This is okay if you're trying to go really deep with multiple colors, or you're concerned because you have a splash that you want to make sure you hit. It's not going to be for every deck. It just depends on what you want to do with your mana base. If you need it, it's definitely there for you. Tarmogoyf. All right, one of the big money cards in the set, right? Everyone loves to open Tarmogoyfs. The question today is this good in Limited? I'll say it's okay. Like, honestly, what makes Tarmogoyf amazing and constructed is the fact that it can get huge quick. Like, you can play this on turn 2 and, crack a fetch land and play an instant and have another creature die. And this thing all of a sudden becomes, like, huge by, like, the 3rd or 4th turn of the game. That's where things get interesting with Tarmogoyf. Is that going to necessarily happen in a lot of Limited games? Probably not. I mean, some decks are going to be more conducive to making this card better than others. I'm thinking maybe Jund Sacrifice, because you're sacrificing some stuff and you're cycling different cards to your graveyard, which could include sorceries, like the one we saw a few moments ago, as well as creatures. If you happen to open a fetch land, well, first off, you're having a really good day then. But that makes your Tarmogoyf a little bit better. Or maybe your opponent's playing something that's populating the graveyard faster, or maybe they have a fetch land, then perhaps I sideboard it in that case. But there are a lot of times this is going to feel kind of like a dud in Limited, quite honestly, because it just doesn't get big enough fast enough. And yeah, it's still a 2-drop. Sometimes you just need 2 drops, so it's not unplayable by any means. I mean, it's still Tarmogoyf, but yeah, it might not be as exciting for you in Limited as other places. Thornscape Battle Mage, and this one's interesting. I mean, I don't want to pay 3 for a 2/2. However, if I have red in my deck, I like the kicker, the red kicker. The doing 2 damage to a creature or player makes me say, okay, this is playable. If I have white in my deck, I'm going to sideboard it in because I could use it to destroy a Signet potentially, and that feels good enough for me. If I'm just in green and not those other 2 colors, I'll skip it. Thragtusk. Okay, this card's incredible. You're going to want to play it. Yes, there's some advantages in certain archetypes. For example, Jund Sacrifice. You can sacrifice this and get the benefit of the token. It's going to be maybe a little extra good in Selesnya Populate or Bant Splicer decks because, again, the token can be duplicated. There's places where maybe this card's a little better than other places, but this is still Thragtusk. This card's incredible. This is first pickable. Play it no matter what. Ovenwald Tracker. I like this. It's a powerful 1-drop. I mean, it's a rare 1-drop, so you know something good's going on here. 1/1 creature for 1. You don't want to play this necessarily in your first turn, even if you have it in your opening hand, because that 1 or 2 damage you might get across, it is going to put this card out, and it's going to be a lightning rod, right? So hang on to it so you have a better chance of protecting it. Put it out on the board later, and hopefully you can untap with it and then start going to town, because this can do a lot of good things as long as you have some big creatures to fight with. Again, it's going to make more sense in the Naya deck or the Gruul deck, probably with the larger creatures, but phenomenal card. Vital Splicer. Well, here's our green Splicer. We had 3 in white, 1 in blue, 1 in green now. And this is going to be perfect for the Bant Splicer deck, obviously, but even if you're not in that deck, there's some economy behind this card. I mean, you're getting 4/4 power and toughness on the board for 4 mana, and 3 of it has regenerate. Yeah, you know what? I'm happy to play this in a lot of different places. Sundering Growth. Now we're going to move into some multicolor cards, starting with some Selesnya Hybrid. It's a nice disenchant, and it has Populate tacked onto it. So if you're looking for a Populate trigger, very, very runnable. And even if you're not, it's a good card to pull out of the sideboard when you need to deal with an enchantment or a Signet in particular. Advent of the Worm, as we get into the gold cards. Here's the deal with these type of cards. They give you a little bit of a break in the casting cost because you're getting a token and not an actual creature. The only extra drawback to the token being the fact that it could maybe be flickered out of play or something like that. But you're still getting yourself a 5/5 for 4. That's huge, huge value. And don't forget, Selesnya, one of the key things going on there is Populate. So the Bant Splicer deck, the Selesnya deck, that type of stuff, you're going to be really happy to run this. Bronzebeak Moa. I always kind of wanted this card to be better than it was. And I think the main problem was it doesn't have evasion. And it does take a little finessing to make great. Like if I play a creature, it's a 5/5 till end of turn. Like that's not bad, but I did pay 4 for this. So it's not coming out till a little bit later in the game. And there's a lot of token strategies in this limited format, which means a lot of chump blockers are going to be out there. If I can give this thing evasion or I could give it trample, well, that's a different story. And there are ways to do it, as we've seen. So just know your deck. Like this isn't always something you're going to want to run probably, but if you feel like you can give it evasion, number one, or trample. Secondly, the other piece of it that really makes this card a lot better is if you have ways to maybe get multiple cards or multiple creatures, I should say, in play at the same time. So your dragon fodder type effects, stuff like that can really pump it up. And we saw the goblin yesterday that can be played. It was a hybrid, but it could be played just for green. And it comes into play and it brings 2 tokens with it. That alone would be +9/+9, right? So now you have an 11/11 creature, which can be blocked by a 1/1 if you can't give it trample. So think that through a little bit. Some decks will actually be able to exploit this card. Other decks won't. So just kind of know before you put it in. Call of the Conclave, just like the Worm. I mean, this is an aggressively costed 3/3 just because you get a token version of it. And again, the Selesnya Populate and Bant Splicer decks are going to turn that into an advantage. Centaur Healer. Fine card. I mean, 3/3 for 3, and you gain 3 life. I mean, a lot of upside. Again, you're getting strong economy behind this card. And again, it's good in a various amount of places, but I am thinking kind of Bant Splicer because there's a lot of flicker effects that go well with it, or even Selesnya because there are some good white flicker effects. Unflinching Courage. Okay, here's another one of those enchantments that I really shouldn't like, but I really do. Again, it doesn't protect itself. It doesn't protect the creature. It doesn't give me anything extra. I could simply get 2 for 1 once I play this on my creature, and that's not good. But the upside is so good. Like this swing that you can get, if you can just hit once with the creature, like the swing is just amazing. So I'm going to take the risk. I'm not going to overplay these in my deck or anything like that, but I'll take the risk and roll the dice because the upside can be quite good. Voice of Resurgence. This is a fantastic mythic, a lot of value attached to it, and it's even good in limited. 2-drop, 2/2. Yeah, that alone is playable in limited, but look at all the upsides you get on top of it. I mean, first off, your opponent a lot of times will just take the damage from this because they don't want to block it and let it die, right? Especially considering green is all about going wide. You should have a fair amount of other creatures to bolster that token that you could make. Secondly, if you do make the token, there's a lot of ways to populate the token, which could get really awkward really quick for your opponent too. And that just becomes exponentially bad for your opponent at that point. And thirdly, it kind of cuts them off from playing instants on your turn. Again, they're making the choice to play the instant or not, so do consider that. They're going to do the thing that's the least of 2 evils, but when you get a certain amount of creatures on the board, it really backs them into a corner pretty quick, and that could be awkward again, especially if you have populate effects. So this card will especially shine definitely in Selesnya Populate decks or Bant Splicer decks, but in general, it's just a good card. Sometimes it's a little annoying when your opponent has like the 1/3 out and like they can just keep blocking it and they're not planning on playing instants on your turn or anything like that. And it does feel like just kind of a 2/2 that's not doing a lot. But a lot of times it does so much more work. Wayfaring Temple. The biggest issue with this, again, is it doesn't have evasion or trample. But if you can give it that, it's pretty good. And if it can get damage across, it has a built-in populate trigger as well, which is pretty awesome. And it gets bigger with the more creatures. So it's perfect, again, for a Selesnya Populate and Bant Splicers. Very good card in those archetypes. All right, let's talk about a few Simic cards, and we'll start off with Coiling Oracle. Now, they haven't made Simic or really enemy colors an archetype or anything like that for their limited design, but not to say you couldn't have some success with those, but for the most part, we're going to look at these as they would fit into things like the Bant deck. As far as this card goes, though, great card. I mean, it's real simple, and this has been reprinted a bunch of times. You probably played with it before, and you know what it does, but just nice little value card for 2 mana, great way to start out the game. Mystic Genesis. Here's a counterspell for starters, but it also gives you perhaps a decent-sized ooze token. Again, it's going to go really well in that Bant Splicer deck to give you another possible sizable creature to populate with. Simic Sky Swallower. Okay, this thing is a beating. 6/6, flying trample. Okay, it costs 7, a little pricey, but it has Shroud. If you can get this thing out many times, this is simply a win condition. A couple things I will warn. First off, it does have Shroud, so it's not hexproof, so be careful with that. Secondly, yeah, it can still die to like Damnation and things of that nature. But if your opponent doesn't have an answer like that for it, it's going to be real hard for them to deal with this card. As far as archetypes go, if you can swing the colors, play it. It's phenomenal. Urban Evolution. I like this card a lot. Consider Explore and Harmonize rolled into one, and you even get some economy behind it. Now, this card I'll play because I feel like even if I can't exploit the Explore portion of the card, well, I'm still drawing 3 cards. I'm pretty happy with that. Don't mind running a 1 of these in my deck. Alright, let's talk about a few banned cards. We have Rock's Warmonk. Solid creature, 3/4 lifelink. If you can get this out early for 3 mana, nice life swing there. And finally, Stoic Angel, second banned card. Another 3/4 flyer of Vigilance. Oh, and by the way, players can't untap more than 1 creature during their untap step. Another just real solid rare if you happen to pick it up. Alright, let's talk about a couple artifacts now. We spoke about signets in previous videos, so I won't rehash that. But I wanted to show you at least the Selesnya signet here. And finally, the Simic signet. And kind of the same thing with the lands. They're all cycles that we've discussed before. For starters, we have Misty Rainforest, of course, the fetch land, and the last one of the cycle to talk about. Like I've said in previous videos, I mean, high value tag to them, so you had a good day if you opened this already. But it's good for you in limited. It fixes mana. Sometimes there's other effects that are helpful. The Jund decks do have a lot of sacrifice kind of recursion going on, so you might be able to use the fetch land and get it back later and use it again, which is kind of nice if you happen to have a Tarmogoyf on your hands. Not only did you have a great day, but it's as good with Tarmogoyf and just random things like that. Alright, Seaside Citadel, of course, is the tri-land for Bant. And finally, we have a couple Guildgates. Selesnya Guildgate and Simic Guildgate. Having said that, that is the complete Modern Masters 2017 set review, all wrapped up in 5 parts. So I had a lot of fun going through the cards. I hope you found this helpful. The sad part is a lot of folks don't get a chance to draft this set because, first off, of the expense when it comes to individual packs, but also sometimes, secondly, availability. A lot of people just buy up the booster boxes and stores don't necessarily hold drafts and things. I hope you get a chance to draft it or at least play sealed with it at some point, whether it's at your local game store or maybe go in with some friends on a box or something like that, because I have played with the other master sets and they are a lot of fun. They do feel like a cube style environment and they can be really awesome. So I hope as many players as possible do get that opportunity. It feels like Wizards is trying to make that possible, maybe with some higher print runs and stuff. So I guess we'll see. The second thing I want to say quickly before we wrap up, this will probably be my last full set review in this style. For Amonkhet, I'm working on some new things. I want to do some shorter, kind of snappier videos where we still review the colors, but maybe look at that in a different way. Maybe combine the spoilers when they come out with the review as maybe one unit, so we're not going over the same cards over and over again. And then also trying to maybe talk about groups of cards and just move things along a little faster. So I'm working on that. I'm trying to produce some of that stuff actually already for Amonkhet, so that will be coming soon. And we'll see how it goes. If that works out better, we'll stick with that. We can always go back if it doesn't. So having said that, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.